Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'd like to welcome you into my home as I discuss this week's assignment. Looking at the historical newspapers in the Jerry Falwell database was a very exciting task for me. I was extremely interested in what was said as well as what wasn't said in the articles. As the background for the subject this week, the Battle of the Bulge started on the morning of December 16th, 1944, and the last German unit was pushed back to its original starting point on January 25th of 1945. In the early stages of the battle, the Germans followed Sun Tzu's advice on the offense, and I'll quote Sun Tzu: "When 5 times the strength, attack him." Using that axiom, the Germans had much success in the early stages of the battle. Eventually, the Allies were able to stall the German advance and then push them back to their original starting line. I think it's kind of noteworthy to keep in mind that when the Germans had the upper hand in the early stages of the battle, there's very little in the Allied newspapers about the battle. The three articles I chose to look at this week come from three varied sources. The first was from a British newspaper, the Manchester Guardian. It's important to note with this article that it was written when the battle was only 3 days old, and at that time the Germans were still doing very well. The article discusses that as the battle was started, the German populace was told not to expect miracles, be very practical on their expectations of the outcome of the battle. Then it goes into a little bit of bragging as it discusses how the preparations for the battle went unnoticed and how the initial thrusts were extremely successful. But what intrigued me about the article was the lack of positive attitude that was demonstrated by the German press. The next article I looked at was written almost a month later, January 13th. It was an Associated Press article. Originally, it was in British newspapers, and then it was reprinted in the Sun newspaper of Baltimore, Maryland. And it was a synopsis of German radio broadcasts during the battle. I was kind of surprised that the Germans would talk so openly on a medium that would be extremely easy for the Allies to intercept. It did have a quote that I found very amusing, and the quote goes like this: "Our elastic disengaging movements resulted in the evacuation of LaRoche and Hives." That's a pretty unique way of saying, hey, we're losing and we're going to have to retreat out of these two towns. Third article I looked at was written by a war correspondent that was attached to Patton's Third Army as they counterattacked the Germans. The article really struck home with me. Lee McArdle, the correspondent, described the environmental conditions that the soldiers had to endure and just what it was like to be there. When I was stationed in Alaska, I was part of the Army's only Arctic infantry unit, and we did all of our major training in the wintertime. I experienced much of the same weather conditions as they did in the Ardennes, living outside in sub-zero weather, not being going into a building for months on end. The major difference, though, between my situation in Alaska and the soldier situation in the Ardennes is there really wasn't anybody shooting at me. Again, I would like to thank you all for paying attention to my video and watching my video. Hope you all have a great week and God bless.